If curiosity leads to breakthrough innovations, unbound creativity, and transformative ideas, and it's so powerful and potent, then why aren't we all tapping into this magical fairy dust? For the sake of this video, we're going to explore 3 dimensions. The first being, as an adult, you have this fear of not having the answers, not knowing. Not only not knowing, but also saying, I don't know.
By the way, a lot of things, like, it's really powerful to be able to say, I don't know. I mean, I would just encourage you guys all to just be like, I don't know. Like, this culture, like American culture, it's this weird thing of like know-it-alls. Everybody has to know everything. How the fuck can you ever learn? When is that going to be valuable?
Why do we fear these 3 words so much? What's wrong with admitting that you don't know everything? I mean, especially if you're like a top-level executive or manager and you're leading a team, to admit that you don't know something can be very, very difficult.
It is most wonderful of you and human of you to see I do not know, because I do not know is a tremendous possibility. Tremendous possibility. The moment you destroy I do not know, your entire learning and expansion process has come to a cease. And this is what you're doing with your belief. You will know some things, you will not know some things. What you do not know, naturally your intelligence will want to know, you don't have to seek it consciously. The moment you see I do not know, your intelligence will start working.
It's also important to understand the distinction between belief and knowledge. Now, I'm going to let Seth Godin explain this one. One of the fears of saying I don't know is that you lose this place of authority, not knowing, in front of a large group of people, looking weak. You're fine. And by constantly putting yourself in a position where you assume or you come off as knowing everything, you're slowly silencing your curiosity and stifling your creativity.
Somebody starts telling you about something, you don't really know the situation, you don't really know the people involved, you certainly don't have the full context, you definitely don't have the technical specifications, and after about 10 seconds, your advice one's just like, I've got something to say here.
Okay, pause here for a second. Creativity comes from curiosity, and curiosity comes from admitting and accepting that you don't have the answers, you don't know everything.
Intelligence is wonderfully interactive. The brain isn't divided into compartments. In fact, creativity, which I define as the process of having original ideas that have value, more often than not, comes about through the interaction of different disciplinary ways of seeing things.
The second part of it is to do with education.
I had a great story recently, I love telling it, of a little girl who was in a drawing lesson. She was 6 and she was at the back drawing, and the teacher said this little girl hardly ever paid attention. And in this drawing lesson she did. And the teacher was fascinated. She went over to her and she said, "What are you drawing?" And the girl said, "I'm drawing a picture of God." And the teacher said, "But nobody knows what God looks like." And the girl said, "They will in a minute." Is that kids will take a chance. If they don't know, they'll have a go. Am I right? They're not frightened of being wrong. Now, I don't mean to say that being wrong is the same thing as being creative. What we do know is, if you're not prepared to be wrong, you will never come up with anything original. If you're not prepared to be wrong. And by the time they get to be adults, most kids have lost that capacity. They have become frightened of being wrong. And we run our companies this, by the way. We stigmatize mistakes. And the result is that we are educating people out of their creative capacities. Picasso once said this. He said that all children are born artists. The problem is to remain an artist as we grow up. I believe this passionately, that we don't grow into creativity, we grow out of it. Or rather, we get educated out of it. Truthfully, what happens is, as children grow up, we start to educate them progressively from the waist up. And then we focus on their heads and slightly to one side.
And the problem with living in the left brain is that you constantly live in this universe of I know everything and I have all the facts, versus questioning everything. By not changing the ingredients, you're not going to change the outcomes and the output. The third dimension I want to explore is work culture. It's got to do with the incentive structure set up in a way that stifles and silences your curiosity and creativity.
I think the massive thing that can be done is to make sure your incentive structure is such that innovation is rewarded and lack of innovation is punished. So you got to be a carrot and a stick. So if somebody is innovating and making good progress, then they should be promoted sooner. And if somebody is completely failing to innovate, not every role requires innovation, but if they're in a role where innovation should be happening and it's not happening, then they should either not be promoted or exited. And let me tell you, you'll get promoted, you'll get innovation real fast.
If you look at people who are at the top of the food chain, leading massive organizations, it's because they come from this place of certainty and self-confidence. It's almost like they have all the answers. Wait, what? And yet strong leaders are the ones that say, I don't know the most. I don't know. So now you can see how over time in your early childhood to when you're a grown-up person, an adult, your curiosity is silenced through external forces. But what you're going to do moving forward, moving from this moment on, turn the stigma and fear of not knowing into a positive, because that leads you down the path of wonder and curiosity and probing and investigating and seeking for the right answers and asking the right questions. It's all right. I don't know is not just about your work life. It's actually how you live your life. It's just the lens through which you look at the world. So what happens when you embody the spirit of I don't know in your personal and professional life? I don't know. You are no longer seen as the carrier of knowledge, but the person who asks really interesting questions. In fact, one of my favorite things to say during meetings or in conversations is, I don't know, what do you think? I don't know, what do you think? It propels collaboration and empowers your team. You elevate people around you so they can be proactive and independent, and you demonstrate that you value their opinion. You become collaborative versus dictative. You also, in a way, humanize yourself and become more relatable. And by doing so, you're creating this space where people on your team can be autonomous, independent, and proactive. Isn't that what you want to begin with? Unless, of course, you're a dictator. Whatever. I mean, I'm not judging. And lastly, it's important to allow for confusion. Through the confusion and chaos, you find beauty. You find the right answers. You find the right questions to ask.
Because when you do that, you begin to empower people, not by giving them the answer, but by helping them find their own answer. Not by rescuing them, but by helping them find their own path. Not by holding on to control on everything, but by giving up some control and inviting others to step in and to step up.
So by switching from offering solutions and advice, you're helping your team switch to asking the right questions. And by asking the right questions, you can get to solving the right problem. Another way to look at I don't know is moving from conclusions to curiosity, asking questions versus having the answers. Seeking for the truth versus believing that you know the truth. To go from surface level to diving deeper. From prescribing to diagnosing. Opinions to discussions. From judgment to understanding. So remember this very powerful framework of curiosity over conclusions, which basically can be looked at as strong opinions held loosely. Strong opinions being your conclusions, held loosely is your curiosity. Knowledge meets I don't know. So what is knowledge at the end? Knowledge is your experiences over time that you've learned. Your knowledge is not you. Those are ideas that you hold, and be willing to shed off old knowledge and replace it with new knowledge. Replace old ideas with new ideas. So next time when you're in a situation, try with the assumption that you don't know. What would you begin to see differently? What are the subtleties and the nuances that you would unearth by exploring and seeking and wandering into areas that you would normally or conventionally not go into? By tapping into this, you would find answers that go beyond your knowledge. Don't get me wrong, knowledge is important, but By having all the answers, you're silencing your curiosity. And by doing so, you're closing yourself off to other ideas, other strong opinions. The second framework we're going to explore is first principles thinking. I'm going to let Elon Musk explain this in a bit of detail. Over to you, Elon.
That it's good to think in terms of the physics approach of first principles, which is, rather than reasoning by analogy, you boil things down to the most fundamental truths you can imagine, and you reason up from there. And this is a good way to figure out if something really makes sense, or if it's just what everybody else is doing. It's hard to think that way. You can't think that way about everything. It takes a lot of effort. But if you're trying to do something new, it's the best way to think. And that framework was developed by physicists to figure out counterintuitive things like quantum mechanics. So it's really a powerful method.
Now, there's a whole bunch of great resources available online talking about first principles thinking and how to apply it. Essentially, you're boiling down to the most fundamental truth and then building up from there. I really like this first paragraph on the Farnham Street blog, which is first principles thinking is one of the best ways to reverse engineer complicated problems and unleash creative possibility, sometimes called reasoning from first principles. The idea is to break down complicated problems into basic elements and then reassemble them from the ground up. It's one of the best ways to learn to think for yourself, unlock your creative potential, and move from linear to non-linear results. Now, I'll link this article below as well. Another great article on first principles thinking is by James Clear. I'll also link this below. And as I was researching for this video, I found this amazing Twitter thread by Jack Butcher from Visualize Value. He's broken down what is first principles thinking to its most basic visual form. So I really like it. If you're on Twitter, I would just follow Jack Butcher anyways. He just puts out a lot of great content. And finally, I would recommend watching this video on first principles thinking by Mike Lamb. Very beautifully illustrated, explaining the concept. There you have it, folks. You have the frameworks from curiosity over conclusions, strong opinions held loosely, to first principles thinking to get started on your journey of creativity, curiosity, and whatever else you want to do with it. I mean, I don't know.
Why? Why?